YouTube channel. So this is the Zig Zag Hat. This is one of my crochet patterns which you will find on my Ravelry page, and I will link this below and hopefully in the video as well. It's quite a simple make. You make the brim straight, join it, and then do the rest in the round. I do use Mosaic crochet, but hopefully this video will show you all of the stitches that you need. The ones that you do need, I use UK crochet standards, so we are using double crochet and treble crochet, so I will show you those so that it makes sense when you're looking at the pattern. So this particular one is the child size in Aran. It does still turn up and fits okay. You could obviously make this brim a little bit deeper, so you could add a few more stitches here, make this a little bit deeper, and then have your turn up deeper. One of the other things that I do is to buy the pom-poms. So these are faux fur pom-poms. Again, if I can still find the link, I'll put the link into the below. But they're just a random variety of colours. I think there was 30 in the bag, and they come with little elastics on them. So what I do is to put a button inside, and then I'm able to take that off whenever I want, so that I have a completely different hat, or I can take it off for washing. I do these in acrylic, so I just find that if you're changing from season to season or doing for children, acrylic is a much more cost-effective way of doing it. So that's the child version. I also have one, this is the adult small, and this is in double knit. Again, exactly the same pattern, and you can also turn this one up. It still does fit a teen to small adult head, and again, just a variation of colour, using the brim as a completely different colour to the main and the contrast. And then I have one more complete, and this is again the adult small in Aran, but I've just done it all in the same colour. I have turned this one up. It does leave it a little bit bulky, I thought, but again, it's a completely personal preference. I don't tend to suit hats, but I do love wearing them when it's really cold. So let's get started into the brim and see how that is made. So I am using a humongous ball of Aran for this one, and I have started off. So to start this off, you are doing your slip knot and then chaining. It tells you in the pattern, depending on what size you're going for, how many stitches to chain. Once you have your chain, you are then going into the second stitch. Okay, so that's the first one. You're going into the second stitch, and this is the double crochet. So in UK, in, pull through, over, pull through, and that's your double. And you would go along to the end in the same way in all of those stitches. Okay, so that's how you start it. You chain depending on the size that you're making, and then you double crochet into each stitch from the second chain. Then what we want to do when we get to the end, to get this ribbing effect in crochet, what we do is to double crochet into the back loop only. So we chain one at the end of every row, we turn, there is our chain one, and hopefully what you can see there, what you can see is that this V is a shape, is a stitch. This is your second, and normally what we would do is to go through both of those. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So we would go through both. But what we're doing for this particular pattern is to only go in that back loop. Okay, so you have your front loop and your back loop, and the only one that you're going into is in that back loop. So rather than pushing in from the front, you're kind of pushing in from the top and down. Okay, so my chain one, my first stitch, so again we're double crochet in, pull through, over, pull through, in, pull through, over, pull through, and as you can see, that is giving you that ridge that we're getting. So I'll complete this round, or this row. Be careful when you're doing this to count them, so that you don't get 3, 4, 5 rows, if not more, up along the brim and then realize that you have 1 or 2 less stitches. So I do tend to count these quite repetitively, and always make sure this one, for some reason, especially on mine, ends up a bit twisted, but you're definitely going into that last stitch. And then you can count across to make sure that you have the right amount if you don't want to count as you're going. And then we chain 1, we turn the piece, and then that is our chain 1. So we're going into the second, and we're doing exactly the same back across. Okay, so the other thing that I do is to count my rows. With this one, I find it a little bit easier. And I do it on the side where, and I'll show you that now when I get to the end of this one. I do it on the side where that ridge is. Okay, so if we turn it over, it's flat. I don't count from this side. You could count from that side, but I just find it easier to count where you have the initial ridge. So I count that as 2 rows. That's a row and that's a row. So 2 rows, so 2, 4, 6, 8. And what I do is that when I get to 10 rows, I mark it so that I don't have to count. So again, each of the hats, you need to complete a different number of rows before you join the brim. So I will complete another 2 rows here and show you what I mean. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I have 10 rows completed. Now what I have these pin markers and I have plastic ones. You could use a little bit of yarn as well and loop it through with a darning needle or tapestry needle. But I use these. So because I know that this is 10, I go in that wee side bit and I clip it, so that's when I know that there's 10 rows. When I get another 10 rows, I put another one in, and so on, so that I don't have to continually count. I just count the clips to know that I have the right number. So what I will do is to continue this brim for the number of rows that it mentions in the pattern, and then I'll come back and show you how to join. Okay, so I've now finished the brim. As you can see, it is a long piece. I have the clips in at 10 rows. And at the top here, you will see I've completed my last stitch. So to join the brim, what I do is turn as if I were going to do a new row, fold it up so that I have the two short sides together. Now for this particular bit, the row that we've just finished is easy to see each of the stitches. The cast on edge is a little bit more awkward, but if you roll it up, okay, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, so you can count across and match them up. So what I do, I don't chain one, so I've turned it, I've joined both together, I don't chain one, I go in to that first, and this is the stitch that I had, and then I go in, the first one's always the fiddliest, to the first one on the cast on, or where we chained. I bring it through and bring it, so that's a slip stitch. I then go into the second one. I always tend to pull apart so that I can see where I went in and the stitch that I'm looking to go into this time. Pull it through, and so on the entire way across. Okay, so that's me the whole way across. If we lay it flat, you can see that you do have a bit of a seam. It's not overly noticeable, but I then like to turn all that to the inside. When it's turned round, you can't see where the join is, really. And that's our cast on tail, which I will put in at the end. Okay, so I don't tighten that off when I'm using the same colour, which I'm going to do for this particular version of the hat. This will be your edge, which as you can see is relatively straight, as long as you have done your chain one, and that's part of the reason for the chain one, just to give us that straighter edge around the edge of the hat. So now what we will do to start in the round is to go into each of the row ends. So again, if I can get this as close as I can, I'm going in here and then into this row, and then in here, and then in here. I've left the markers in at the minute because it allows me to see when I should have reached a count of 10. Again, I am chaining one and doing a DC into each of these. So through, over and through, over and through. Okay, so I continue that way until I get right round the hat. And that's me at 10, which I know is correct because I'm at the marker, which was marking 10 rows. And that's then when I take out the markers at that stage. You don't need the markers. I just think that it helps to keep you right in terms of what you're counting here. So I'll continue in the round and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so that's me back round. And then what I do is to slip stitch into that first stitch so that it's joined. Now, what you can do at that stage is to mark whatever. I tend to mark the slip stitch that I've just done, but it really doesn't matter. You can mark the last stitch of the round I think it's just habit. I mark the slip stitch so that I know that in this instance, particularly for this pattern, I don't want to stitch into that. I'm stitching up to this one. So if you follow the pattern, there's a few more DC rows to go, and then I'll come back whenever we're ready to start the mosaic and show you how I do that. Okay, so I'm about to join in the other colour. So if we take a look at this one, we can see that the zigzag is in a different colour. And what we do with mosaic crochet is that each row is the alternate colour. So if we look on the back, you will see that a little bit easier. Okay, so you're seeing that each colour is per row essentially, and that gives us this lovely effect on the front, and that depends on whether we DC in the back loop or treble in the front loop. The treble again is UK term, so I will be showing you the UK version. But if you treble in the front, you're trebling in the row below. So when I get to that stage, I will show you that as well. So you treble in the front of loop in the row below, and you double crochet in the back of loop of the row that you're working on. So let's get started. In this particular one, I'm going to use white for the zigzag. I'm hoping it's going to show up on this particular yarn, and I'm hoping it's going to look a little bit quirky and different. So I've kept my marker in, and as I say, I signify the slip stitch join. Now what I do, I leave my yarn connected. I don't disconnect every single row, and let me show you again how that comes out. So what you end up with is this running up the inside of your hat. Okay, so you don't have, and that's the seam where I joined the brim. So you then have that running up the entire hat. But that to me is much, much nicer than having all of these ends to weave in. Okay, so the way that I do it, and this may be different for everyone, I slip stitch with the new colour. So when I'm bringing in the new colour, I don't create a knot or anything else in this bit. I simply just pull it through, and do my chain one as I normally would. Now again, just with it being a hat, and making sure that these are secure, I do knot it. I wouldn't necessarily knot everything that I do, but I do knot in this particular hat. I'll then weave them through back and forth a little bit inside. So that's my white joined and my chain one done. The other thing that I don't think I mentioned before is that this chain one is really just to keep everything even. It's not really doing anything other than that, and it's not counted as a stitch in this pattern. So this stitch, I'll bring this a bit closer, this stitch that it has been slip stitched into is your first stitch, so don't go across into that second one. In this particular row, the first row of the new colour, or the second colour, contrast colour, we DC into the back loop. So similar to the way that we did on the brim, we DC the entire way around. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back and show you the treble in the front. Okay, so that's my background. With these rows, I don't tend to use my stitch marker because each row you're using a different colour, and it's much easier to see the start and the stop. I can still see that I have this little slip stitch. The light's not catching this particularly well. So you have this little slip stitch, but this is my first stitch, my first DC. So again, what I do is to then bring in my first colour. I leave this white over to the front, I grab the grey almost from underneath, give it a little tug, now not too much, but a little tug so that that's tight and hasn't loosened. And I then put the white just down out of my way. I don't want to catch it because I want to be able to use it in the next row. And I go down, I slip stitch in the back stitch. I don't think it actually matters. I think you could slip stitch normally, but I slip stitch into the back, catch the new colour and bring it through, and then chain one. Okay, so that's my next colour joined in. Okay, so within the pattern in this row, the first stitch is a DC, and it shows within the pattern that it's a DC in the back of loop only. Now, again, as you can see, because I have this, the white stitch and my new stitch, I go down in both. Again, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just think it gives a cleaner join. Whatever way that works for you, continue to do that. But it's the normal DC, so that's my first DC in that stitch. And again, if I catch the white and pull it a little, it does bring all that into line. If I show you from the outside actually, on this hat, this here, so you can see a little bit of a slight widening where the join is, but it's not massively noticeable, and it certainly won't be when it's on your head. If, like me, you always look for the back of the hat and put it to the back of your head anyway, you're really not going to see it. So as you can see with this, we have our stitch, and this is the corresponding on the row below. For this stitch, this is the corresponding on the row below. Okay, so where my thumb is. And what I want to do with the treble is yarn over and pick up that front of loop on the row below. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through the last 2. And what we end up with is that it covers the white in the background. This one is left. This is why we do the DC, because that's going to be the white. So again, let's have a look at that on the other hat. So we're doing this stitch at the minute, and then the white will come down into, as I'm saying, this gap the next time. Okay, so the pattern calls for a few of these, so I'll just demonstrate it again a little bit closer to the camera. So yarn over, picking up that next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over. So that's a treble in UK. So yarn over through the row below, and for a treble what we would normally be doing is going into the row that we've just worked, but for mosaic crochet we go into the row below. And as I say, what that essentially does is to hide that white, but allows the white to come through when we need it to. So when I get back to the next row, I'll show you then the white popping through, and you should be able to then keep going with the hat until the zigzag portion is finished. So then when we get to the next bit, I'll just show you this bit as well. It's a DC back of loop. So the DC back of loop is done on the row just worked, so the white one. So we go down through the back of loop on the white, and then the next one is a treble. So this white we're going to work into the next time. So by working into the back of the loop, we're going to work into this white one. So by working into the back of the loop, what that allows us to do is to work into the front of the white loop, and that will give us the white treble coming down in the next row. Okay, so this is me back round again. Again, I'm going to do the slip stitch with the next colour. So leave the grey to the front, picking the white up from the bottom, and then slip in the grey. For this one, again, I'm going to, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going down, the first one is a treble, so I'm going to slip stitch right through just to keep the strength in that seam. And chain 1, and then it's this, it's hard to see actually in the white, there is a straight stitch just tucked away in here that we want to come down to. So yarn over, I normally turn my hook over so that I can pick it up through 2, 2. Now the next ones in this, over these trebles, we are DC. I always find the first one a little bit more awkward because it's at that join point, so you just have to be careful that you're picking up the right stitch. But you'll see when I get across here that it is much easier. So DC into the back of the loop, so you'll see those front loops all sitting in front of the white. This is then the white treble into the front of loop in the row below. So we're looking to pick up that white straight front of loop on that stitch. So yarn over, through, yarn through 2, yarn through 2, and then DC. And that's it really. They're your DCs in the back of loop, your trebles in the front, and as you can see, that's that starting to come through. If I bring this hat back in, we're here and on this row, and then the next row is going to cover up some of that white again with the main colour. So keep going, follow the chart. If you get stuck, let me know. But they're your DCs in back of loop, trebles in front of loop, and we've gone through the brim and how to join. So the point that I will come back is when we're ready to do the DC2 together, and also show you how to finish off the top of the hat. Okay, so we are up to the decreases. I've already done a few rows, and I just want to show you the double crochet 2 together. So I'm just about to do one at the minute. So here we go in through 1 stitch as if you were going to do a double crochet and pull your yarn through. We then go into the next stitch again, pull your yarn through. We're through 2 stitches here, and what will happen is that that's us double crocheting them together. So we yarn over and bring through all 3. And then we continue on until the next one. So through, bring your yarn through, bring your yarn through, and through it all. So that's your double crochet 2 together. And once I get to the very top, I'll come back again so that we can see how to pull it in at that point. Okay, so I have finished and slip stitched to the first one, and then I still have this hole. Sorry about the dark yarn, but you can see that there is still a hole there. So this is how I close those off. So I pull the yarn through, I don't knot it at that stage, and then I thread it to a needle. Okay, and then what I do, each stitch, as we know, has 2 loops. I only go through the front one, so I know I have 10 here, so I will count round and go through the front loop only in each of these stitches. Okay, and then, so I've gone round all, front loop only, and then when you pull it in, it gives you a nice finish to the top of your hat. Now I had 10 stitches there, and I find that that is still okay. Some patterns that I have used, you go an extra row, but with this Aran wool in particular, it doesn't leave too much of a pucker at the top, and when you're putting a pom-pom on, it looks perfect. So that was 10 DCs I had at the top. So then I put the yarn and the needle through, and I get my button, and I sew it through a couple of times, just making sure that I'm coming out more or less on the point of the hat, at least for the first one. And then and the last time that I come up and through, hopefully this yarn isn't too thick. I'm not sure why I do this. I kind of hope that it makes it a bit more stable, but I wrap it around and then sew it off inside. And then push it through all those threads and snip. Okay, so a few other ends, as you can see, to do in there, but what I will do, I think I will put a black pom-pom. I also have a red one, which would look lovely on that hat too. And all I do with these is to push the crochet hook. Now I do use a slightly thicker. If you use a thinner crochet hook for this, I tend to find that it bends. So push it through as close to that top where we pulled in as possible. I find the elastic and then pull it through. There we go. And I find those stay attached really, really well. I need to give that one a bit of a fluff up. I've just taken it out of the bag. And there is all the stitches that you will need for the hat. One last thing I thought I'd show you, and again, everyone does this differently, but it is what has worked for me, and even throwing these hats into the wash, it doesn't seem to unravel. So whenever I'm yarning this in, I take a few of these stitches that are behind the seams, I go along a couple, and then I come back on myself 3 or 4, depending on the length I've left, and I haven't left myself very much here, and then back again, and then back again. I don't tend to knot it, and that tends to be enough to keep that all together. So hopefully that has been useful. I'll show you on this one. So my join is here. So this is the line on this one. So as I showed you on some of the other ones, I think it's even less noticeable on this particular hat. And again, you could turn that one up. This is the adult large. It does fit my husband. So it's a good sized hat, and the 3 varieties of size do give you from the children's right through teenagers, adult, and into some of the larger sizes. But it is adaptable, and you can play with the pattern, the number of repeats to give you a wider hat. You can change the number of chains at this stage so that this is narrower, and you could play about with the zigzag as well. But I have found that 2 for all of the sizes works really well. You can do an extra few rows at either end of the zigzag to give you slightly more depth. But there you go. Hopefully you enjoy making. Thank you very much for watching along. See you next time.